right, so on this problem, we're going to be doing division with decimals, and this time we're going to be using what we call a two-digit divisor. So a couple things to remember is you cannot divide by a decimal. So the first thing we have to do is know that we have to change this into a whole number. Now to do that, we have to multiply the divisor by a power of 10. Now there is another rule in addition to that. What you do to the divisor, you also have to do to your dividend. So what you do to your divisor, you must do to your dividend. So when we get rid of this decimal, whatever we do here, we have to do to this number as well. Now the dividend can have a decimal, okay, but the divisor cannot. So let's get started. So this number right here is your divisor, and it is always going to go on the outside of your division bar. So notice where I'm putting that number. That number is going to go on the outside of your division bar. Then you have your division bar here, and the 42 is the number that's actually being divided. Okay, so that's the number we want to divide. So the first thing we have to do is we have to get rid of this decimal. You cannot multiply by a decimal. It has to be a whole number. So to do that, we're going to move this twice. So we're going to say times 10 times 10. So remember, every time we move the decimal to the right, it's like we're multiplying by 10, but in this case, we moved it twice. So we're actually going to say we multiplied this number by 100 in order to get 7. So we now have removed that decimal. We now have a 7, but we can't simply just put the 42 down here. If we multiply this number by 100, we have to also multiply this number by 100. So a lot of times you think of it as the same way. You simply put the decimal here because all whole numbers have a decimal. We just don't have to write it. So we put the decimal there. We move it once, add a 0, that's times 10. Move it once more, that is times 100. So now we can rewrite our problem as 4,200 divided by 7. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, I like to count by my multiples and make sure that I do it properly. You might already know all your facts, so this is just an extra step to help you make sure you pick the right one. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply by my 7 and do all my multiples. So we're going to have 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 42. Now I already see that 42 is the same number I have here, so I can actually stop there, or I can just do them all. Especially if I have a lot more numbers, I'd probably want to do them all. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to say 7 does not go into 4. Now I always put a 0 there just to make sure I line up my numbers in the right spots. So we're going to say 7 does not go into 4. But 7 does go into 42, and we can see that right here, and that's times 1, times 2, times 3, times 4, times 5, times 6 times. So we can put a 6 here, and we're going to say 7 times 6 is 42. We subtract that number, and we get a 0. Now, it looks like we're done, but we are not done. We still have 2 more digits here, so we do have to bring those down. So I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to go, okay, 7 doesn't go into 0, so I'm going to say 0 times. So let's bring down the next digit. I'm going to say, okay, 7 does not go into 0, so I'm going to say 0 times. Now you can say, continue on and say, okay, 0 times 7 is 0. Subtract it and you get a 0. You can go on all the way to that step, but most of the time when you end up with all zeros here, you can just stop. Now, if you want to make sure your answer is correct, okay, you can take this number, 600 times 7, and you should get 4,200. So let's go ahead and do that. 6,000 times 7. So we know 6 times 0, we know 7 times 0 is 0. 7 times 0 is 0 again. 7 times 6 is 4,200. Now you may ask, why didn't we get 42? Well, that's because we had removed our decimals, so this is the number we're using. So we would want to make sure we got 4,200. Since we had already multiplied both numbers by 100, this is the number we're using.